You're welcome back. This is the Keypoints, and we're live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7, and online at 3news.com, also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. So there's been talk about a possible third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic in the country all throughout this week, and we're going to be looking at that and many other issues around that development. In the studio with me, we have Dr. Titus Bayo. He is the Deputy General Secretary of the Ghana Medical Association. Good morning, Doc. It's good to have you.
Good morning.
And also joining us on Zoom, we have Dr. Asiedu Bekwe. He is the Director of Public Health with the Ghana Health Service. Good morning, Doc.
Good morning.
It's great to have you, and we're grateful for your time. Yes, so let's start with this, talk about a possible third wave of the pandemic. Some actually say that perhaps we are experiencing that third wave. Let me have your thoughts on that.
Thank you very much. So I think that last week we had a meeting in Kumasi, and what we said was that if our current situation does not improve, then we are actually going to get into the third wave. If you look at our epic curve over the period, you can see that there tends to be minor humps before the big one. So you can see that there was an earlier one that started in March, like May, it ended. We had a big one in June, July. And so somewhere like August, it was like end, which was supposed to be the first wave. Then it flattened out, and then somewhere in November, we had this other small wave that was actually due to a lot of school outbreaks and workplace. And then that one flattened out. And then end of December, you have the big one for the second wave. So when this one started, the idea was that is it similar to the ones that were occurring? So that was you have a smaller one and a big one. But if you look at the current shape of the curve, I think that we are actually in the third wave.
We are in the third wave. And so what is being done to try to deal with the situation, to curb the situation? Because looking around or having discussions with the experts in the sector, people like yourselves and Dr. Bayo here, the suggestion is until we have sufficient vaccines or a larger proportion of the people are vaccinated, our surest bet is the preventive protocols, washing of hands, sanitizing, wearing masks in certain spaces, social distancing and all of that. But we continuously see that those protocols are not being complied with. So what exactly are we doing to deal with the situation, if indeed, like you're saying, we are in the third wave?
Yes, so I think that it's a challenging situation that we are trying to address. You see, the Ghana Health Service approach to the response is not very much dependent on the number of cases. But the average Ghanaian tends to look at the cases to get his mind to conform. And I think that's where the challenge is, because we preaching against the third wave is not dependent on whether you have 20 cases on the dashboard or you have 500 cases on the dashboard. So the idea, and I'm happy you are alluding to it, that the best intervention, and I think that people will trivialize it, that's why we're talking about adherence to protocols, why we're talking about securing beds. The best intervention, which is the most cost effective, is adherence to the protocols. And yet it's difficult. I mean, actually it's very challenging to get that message to the Ghanaian to appreciate you wear the mask. So what we intend doing, or what we have been doing, is how do we use influencers and people who have impact on people to get them to adhere to protocols. So if you look at it, just a few weeks ago at the Ghana COVID Trust Fund, actually I outdoor some brand ambassadors, which we are hoping that people will look up to them and then conform to the protocol, particularly the wearing of the mask. We are also going to follow suit, and we have been engaging a few, because we're thinking that it's very challenging to get the Ghanaian to appreciate. And very soon, I think the president will communicate likewise to the Ghanaian that it is not just a vaccine. but it's the preventive method which is very crucial. So I think that when we started giving the vaccines, people were somehow whether confused that the disease is gone, and then even the few that were wearing the mask put it off. So the next few weeks, and our plan is to make sure that we try and get the figures before June. So the next 2 months, that's what we're going to do, to have a very heightened campaign on promoting and enforcement of the mask. So the promotion is the use of the influencers, the celebrities, the champions, the high-profile chiefs and religious leaders. And then the enforcement is going to be done in different levels. So one is like when you are going to sit in the trotro, the station master must ensure that you have a mask before you sit in the trotro. When you are going to the supermarket.
But if I may ask, why aren't we doing that now? What does that require? I mean, to get this started, what would it entail? Shouldn't we be doing this? In fact, isn't it a bit long overdue?
No, that's what I'm saying, that it's not being heightened. It's not that it's zero, but it's fine. Now, I think one thing which is very clear, and I think every Ghanaian is getting it's that is the adherence to protocol, which is the ultimate.
Are you sure people are getting that message? Do you think people that message has gotten down well?
Listen, I think that even the narrative from you is pointing to the fact that.
But that's true. We're looking at the average Ghanaian, people who would not necessarily, be in tune with certain, developments globally and all of that. I mean, definitely there is some level of disconnect.
Yes, I know what I'm talking about. The media says agenda. If the media says that the way to go is wear the mask, Ghanaians conform to it. And
We've been saying that all this while that message has been there. And so if we are seeing some high level of non-compliance, then there must be some problem because the media continually, we put it out there.
No. You see, it's just putting out. Is the way it is put out there. You see, I think that is not only unique to Ghana. I mean, adherence to protocols is a very challenging issue. So it's a collective effort about getting it done, and is a mindset. Changing mindset is a bit challenging to get somebody to change mindset. So we are thinking that, and what we are saying is that it needs to be collective, and all must be on board. We need the key people to make sure that saying that this is the way we should go as a country. So it's not the health service alone that can do it. It's all the country decided that, hey, if I'm working from my house, I need to wear a mask, and you close to me must also wear a mask. You can also have an individual enforcement. So it's not just about security people enforcing, but you can tell your guy around you that, my man, why are you not in a mask? I mean, that is the drive they are trying to push, so that it becomes a national effort.
Very well. Viewers, let me quickly announce also that we have Dr. Kwame Sapon Esiedu joining us on Zoom. He's in the UK. He's a pharmacist and a fellow with the CDD Ghana. Dr. Sapon Esiedu, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning. Good morning to Titus and Kofi.
Right.
Nice to be with all of you.
Great. It's good to have you. Hope you're doing well in the UK.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Yeah, new day.
Good. Okay. So, as you heard, I'm sure, from Dr. Esiedu, he's saying that looking at what's happening, the numbers and all, we are in the third wave. We're experiencing the third wave. Your thoughts so far on that?
Yes, thanks. I have always said that I don't focus too much on these waves because, like I heard Kofi say, the waves would come dependent on human behavior. Compliance with behavioral attitudes in public health are quite difficult. But yes, if you look at the numbers as they pertain now, we are having an uptick. As to how big this wave would be, because normally when you talk about waves, as he said earlier, we saw the first wave and how it worked. And sometimes you have bumps and sometimes you avert it. It's not because that wasn't a wave, that bump wasn't a wave, but perhaps mitigation was put in place by way of the protocols to ensure that it didn't hit a spike. We had the uptick in December, January, which became a wave because the mitigation wasn't there. But in all the waves we've had in Ghana, there are certain things that sequencing tells us. The first one predominantly was by the strain that came in from Wuhan, which was the Chinese strain. That had a reproductive number of 2.4 to 2.6. Then we had the bump in, what do you call it, around October, November, which had a reproductive number of about 3, because that was what was coming from the UK and Italy and all that. We averted that. It quickly subsided. Then we had the uptick in December, which gave us our worst mortalities. That was predominantly determined by the alpha strain, or the UK, what was called the Kent strain then.
Right.
That had a reproductive number of 4 to 5, and we saw the mortalities. The current variants we are having seems to be driven, the current uptick we are having seems to be driven by the Delta strain, and this is what's poignant for me. That has a reproductive number between 5 and 8. That is 200 times more contagious than what we had from Wuhan, and 100 times more contagious, 100% more contagious than what we got from the alpha strain of Kent. However, our behaviors have dropped, and that is a point I think Kofi was making. Our behaviors, while the reproductive number is going up, our compliance with protocols is going down. That is what, for me, I look at and I cringe. Because I would expect that the more lethal the pathogen, the better we would react to it. And I would end at this point by saying that as citizens, I don't think we have understood this dynamic very well. And I'm just hoping that we can get the citizens to understand this dynamic of what Dr. Siedebekwe is saying, that we are in the third wave, but what actually is driving the wave. Because for me, that is what's important, as to how many people would fall sick, as to the pressures that our health system would come under, is dependent on the ability of this pathogen to move from person to person and how quickly. The reproductive number and the doubling rate.
Very well.
At the moment, we are not doing too well with both, and that is what should be concerning to us.
Very well. Thank you for that, Doc. I'll be coming back to you. Now, Dr. Bayo, it's a concerning situation. Talking about behaviors and the fact that, of course, and it's true, anytime we seem to let our guards down, we see the surge. Then we get back into, that whole mode about let's, comply with protocols, and we see a certain level of, if you like, flattening of the curve and all of that. So what do you think can be done? Should the authorities resort to panic advocacy or messaging as against what they say, remain calm, don't panic, that kind of thing? What do you think the message should be? If the numbers are not presenting huge, numbers on figures on the dashboard, then people go to sleep on their compliance levels. What should be done?
It's a very sad situation. Let me say good morning to Kwame, good morning to Dr. Siedebekwe, and then to our listeners. It's a very sad situation we find ourselves. If you ask what should be done, first I think we should address what was not done right. And then we will know what we can do to improve the situation. If you look at it, the biggest challenge we have had, in my opinion, has been a challenge with risk communication. We all put in an effort, and then when we are making progress, we relax. Now, it is natural for people to relax because adherence to a new lifestyle is difficult. You need continuous reinforcement for people to be able to keep up with a new lifestyle. And putting on the masks all the time, social distancing, all that, is very challenging. So anybody managing our risk communication must know necessarily that at some point there'll be fatigue, and therefore people will be tired of all of this. So
you don't let fatigue set in the first place.
Yes, and when in the midst of that you send confusing signals, then we have a problem. We are at this state because at some point when we made a lot of noise after the last major wave, around January, February, March there, and we were able to bring it down by our behavior. Some people thought it was a vaccination that brought it down. It wasn't a vaccination. It was a concerted effort by all citizens and all of us behaving well. That brought that wave down. Now, after that, people let their guards down. To make things worse, when little aliquots of vaccination started dropping in the country, The few vaccinated, in my opinion, begin showing what I'll call selfish life of thinking that they are protected and therefore they can just do anything. I think, other than the word selfish, I don't know what word I can use to describe it. Because if you have less than 2% of your population vaccinated, and you think that because you're protected, you can do anything else. And in this dimension, a lot of us citizens were victims to it. People who were vaccinated were calling us to mass gatherings and were following. People who were vaccinated were going to funerals feeling they were okay. Meanwhile, 99% of the people at that funeral were not vaccinated. So that was another arm that has brought us to where we are.
Right.
To make things worse, when this Delta variant started coming in, and we were trying to make the noise that, look, let's be careful, let's be careful. Like Kwame said, if you understand the epidemiology of this current strain, the degree of its infectivity or its attack rate, you would know that if it comes into a country, we have challenges.
Right.
Now, when this was coming up and you want to make noise, sit up, all of that, those managing our communication are in a fix. Do we press the panic button? Do we tell people to remain calm? Do we reassure people of what we have? Truth is, that type of messaging confuses everybody. And if that is coupled with the leaders that we look up to, showing like there is nothing, then we have a challenge. So going forward, if you ask me, I am happy the Director of Public Health is looking at other people different from our politicians.
Right.
The politicians have failed us big time. I think we have to look for new people in the society, and it has to take me and you, everybody in the media, and all of us to realize that where we are, it doesn't matter who calls us. This is the existential challenge that faces us as a people.
Right.
The vaccines are not coming. We cannot get enough vaccines to rapidly vaccinate the population. We have a contagious strain that is lethal. We have a health system that is fragile. We have seen the people we are getting the vaccines from, what this strain did to them.
Yeah.
And we are not getting enough vaccines. So in this mix, our only solution as people is personal protection and getting our neighbor to protect themselves.
Right.
And then we can all be safe. And not to look forward to the traditional political leadership we have ever looked to. We have to take things into our hands. And until we get there, we are having a big challenge.
Right.
Because we have a population that doesn't believe, some people don't believe that this is real because they look at the people who should be telling them and they are doing the worst.
Right.
So this is where it is. So I think we must change our communication direction. Thank you.
Very, very well. Dr. Asiedu Bekwe, let me come back to you. Doc, can you hear me? Dr. Bekwe?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. So, yes, let's look at the issues here. We've talked about vaccination and the fact that obviously the vaccination rollout has, hit some challenges. We do appreciate that. But first of all, if you could let us understand, what percentage of the cases being recorded now could be traced to the Delta virus? What percentage are we recording? Has that overtaken I believe it used to be the UK variant that was, dominant?
Okay, thank you very much. So let me say that we are actually expanding the genomic sequencing in the country. It's actually being done by 4 institutions now. You have WACBIC, you have Noguchi, then we have there are 2 institutions actually in Noguchi that are doing it, and I have UHAS. So there are 4 institutions that are doing it, and so it is not the typical, let's say, the one person and then a genomic sequencing done. So far, what they've done, I would say that it's still the alpha variant is a dominant, but there's a gradual increasing presence of the delta. Most countries the delta has taken over, but for now, what we have is a delta, and maybe possibly the next few months we're going to have the dominance of the delta, but still the alpha, which is the dominant strain, which is in the country. I think that one thing, because we are not doing very extensive genomic sequencing. What we were doing initially was we were actually testing the persons that were coming from outside. Because the idea is that the cases will come from outside. So we were actually testing those who are positive from the outside, and then to find out whether they have the genomic strain. And then a few was being done in the community. So the early cases were actually detected somewhere in April at the airport, and it took reasonably a long time before we had it in the the Achimota outbreak. But for now, there are incidences of it being recorded in other parts of Ashanti region and Greater Accra. I think that when it becomes more extensive, we can know the extent of spread in the country. One thing I need to state is that though we do very limited genomic sequencing, most of the cases that are ill at the hospital are actually the people who are not vaccinated. So somehow it tells you clearly that vaccination gives protection to against severe disease.
Very well. Now, you talked about the situation in Kumasi, and that brings to the fore the bit about the Kumasi, the KMA, and the statement that it issued concerning when they detected the Delta variant in Kumasi as far back as December 2020. But we got the GHS confirming this in June. Could you, shed some light on this situation?
No, I think that it was a slip on their side because, I'm sure the person is talking about a variant. So that PR is not very sure what variant you're talking about. Clearly, what at that time was alpha. So it's not the KMA does not detect viruses. So it was just a slip in their communication.
So you're sticking to the initial statement, which is that GHS actually confirmed the Delta variant, being in the communities in June 2021. That's what.
Yes.
Okay.
The KMA one,
was a mistake, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, very well. That must, that indeed is a grave mistake then, because it raises a whole lot of issues about, confidence in institutions and all of that. But thanks for that clarification. Now let's look at vaccines. Currently, less than 2% of the population is vaccinated. And we are talking about a vaccine rollout plan, which has, been met with some challenges. We are told that we're expecting some quantities of the Pfizer vaccine in August, middle of August, and some quantities of the AstraZeneca as well. But how optimistic should the citizens be about these arrangements that are to be put forward, or to actually kick in later on in the year? Because obviously there's a huge chunk of people who are waiting for their second doses of AstraZeneca. What is the situation?
Okay, thank you very much. So I think that the vaccine situation is challenging, but the next few weeks we have an improvement. First, because we had a cold chain system that was kind of restrictive, so we were not kind of very much exposed to all kind of available vaccines. At that time, our cold chain could only pick vaccines that were to be stored between 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. So that's why you're going to look at the AstraZeneca and the others, because we didn't have the ultra-negative cold chain equipment that could take in Moderna and Pfizer. Now, as I speak, we have a reasonable number of those ultra-negative cold chain equipment in the country. So now we can take Pfizer. So that's why we are going to get about 1.3 million doses of Pfizer in the next few weeks. And then we're going to get the COVAX facility. That was a facility that gave us the initial doses. As of now, we have received about 1.3 million doses of AstraZeneca, and most of them come from COVAX. So COVAX is going to give us 249,000 also in the next few weeks. The idea is to get 200,000 to be able to cover those who are due for the second wave. So that's what the president and other key people are trying to make sure that we cover that second phase.
Yes.
Then the African Union actually has an arrangement with Johnson & Johnson. And we as a country were kind of allocated 17 million doses. And let me say the 17 million doses is over a period of time, starting from the third quarter of 2021. So it's a mixture of Johnson & Johnson and then AstraZeneca. And what they are saying is that by third quarter, we'll start getting it. So what is very clear is that come 2-3 weeks, we will start getting some vaccines. What we are putting up as a service is to making sure that our people are well trained and well versed about how to use this ultra-negative cold chain equipment, because we've never used those things before. And I think that Now we have facilities like the zip line, and then the UPS, and then the government itself has bought a lot of ultra-innovative coaching equipment, including donations from UNICEF. So now we are in to receive a number of vaccines. And let me also state that initially we had only 2 vaccines registered, and now we have 5. So we have Moderna, we have Pfizer, we have Johnson & Johnson, we have AstraZeneca, and we have Sputnik V. So for now, I think that we have expanded our available vaccines for use.
Very well. Now, it's interesting. You talk about the fact that we, due to the infrastructural deficiencies in terms of the cold chain you talk about, that was why we couldn't get certain types of vaccines. Talking about the Pfizer, for instance, but you're saying that we now have that infrastructure, so we can take on that. But is that the only reason why? Because earlier on we were told that we couldn't actually get vaccines directly from like on the government to government level because of all those challenges with that kind of procurement. But now we're hearing that it's because we didn't have a particular kind of infrastructure. Could you clarify that?
No. So the narrative has not changed. The issue is that when you have an improved infrastructure, you are more likely to get other vaccines. So assuming you are a country that does not have facility that can host ultra-negative, then you cannot get the Pfizers. So there's an obvious global challenge in terms of availability of the vaccines. The GH countries are making available some vaccines, but then if you do not have that kind of cold chain facility, you cannot even access them. So that's why I say that for now, they are better placed than we were some months ago.
Very well. Thanks for that clarification. Now, let's still stay on vaccines here a bit. I have figures here that suggest that out of the 1.2 million vaccines that have been administered, the first dose constitutes about 865,422, and the second dose 405 and 971 or so. So again, there's a huge chunk of people, waiting for their second doses. But that is AstraZeneca. We are told that some 250,000 doses will be coming in AstraZeneca very soon. That will still leave about 200,000 people, without their second doses. And so when you hear of Pfizer coming in, the question is, could Pfizer be used to top up AstraZeneca, those who have the first dose, or what is the situation? Let us understand some public education here. People who have had AstraZeneca first dose, could they or can they take some other vaccines as a second dose, or what? Just for public education purpose. Let us understand.
Yeah, so I think that in the early stages, the idea is that you go all straight. So if you are going AstraZeneca, you go all AstraZeneca. But now I know there are other countries who are doing interchangeability of vaccines, and even the Chancellor of Germany took AstraZeneca, I think Moderna. So it's a mixture. For now, Ghana, we are not there yet. So we will still stick to the straight one. So we are saying that AstraZeneca. We're not very sure because of the possible side effects that may occur. We want to be very conservative for now and make sure that we get the remaining 200,000 for those who are left to be covered. We do not have enough evidence for now to be switching vaccines. So the 1.3 billion doses that we are getting for us is going to be for those who have never received any vaccine, and not to complement those who had the first dose.
Okay, so still on that, I mean, there are concerns about the time lapse, because there are prescribed intervals for the first dose and the second dose. And so for people who are still waiting for their second dose, aren't they having their, if you like, their situation compromised with this delay? Because you're looking at periods beyond 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and all of that. How much of a challenge is that, and what really can be done to address that? Because at the end of the day, if you go beyond the timelines, you might as well have not taken the vaccine then, if it's going to be redundant to a certain degree.
Yeah, so I think that the efficacy of the vaccine, I think can last for up to 6 months. I think that after 6 months, then you're kind of lost.
That is a first dose awaiting a second dose?
Yes, but I think that, you see, these viruses, that's what they call the novel viruses. there's a lot of literature going on, and with time, we tend to get more knowledge about it. Initially, AstraZeneca was about first dose, they taking those 3 weeks, 4 weeks, went to 8 weeks, went to 12 weeks. Now there are countries that are doing it in 4 months, some are doing 5 months. So I think that for now, what is available is that you can have neutralizing antibodies up to 6 months. So we are very certain that before that time, all those who had the first dose would have gotten the second dose to make sure that they achieve true immunity.
Very well. So, yes. So basically, we're looking at a situation where you said it is possible that you could have a combination of vaccines.
No, I say other countries are
doing that, but we.
Yes, for us, we don't. We are a bit more cautious now. We want to be sure that the Ghanaians who took the first dose of AstraZeneca will get the second dose. It's a challenging situation. COVAX is promising 249,000. It means that there are about 20,000 that we have to get the vaccines. And we are exploring all other means to make sure that those people are covered. Let me say that, you see, when we had the initial allocation of AstraZeneca, the thinking was that, do we do double dosing or single dosing? And Nigeria did the double dosing. So what they did was that they estimated the people of who are supposed to get the vaccine. So like Ghana, we have 700,000. So it means that we have given 300,000 people. And so you get your initial dose and you are sure of the second dose. But we were looking at the literature by WHO that says that a single dose is better than a small population that has a double dose. So that's what we went for. And because there's some level of protection even with single dose. But we also had anticipation that we were able to get additional doses with time. So but we'll try and get it. But other countries would have given less number of persons because they want to go full double dose instead of single dose.
Very well. Now, before you go, we do know that you'll be traveling very soon, so we'll let you go very soon. But looking at the situation now, do you think a lockdown is imminent? Should we consider that? Would you recommend that?
No, you see, at times when I hear lockdown, then I'm wondering whether Ghanaians hear those things. Well, why do you want to get to a lockdown? You can easily prevent it by wearing your mask.
No, but I'm asking about the situation now. So do you think that currently the situation would, require that kind of action?
No. See, we try to superimpose the incidence of cases in 2021 and 2020. Clearly, the number of cases being recorded now, if you want to situate it month by month or day by day, we are recording less cases now than we were recording in 2020 at the same time. So though the cases are rising, we think that when we conform to the protocols, we will not get there. You see, as was said by Kwame, we can actually minimize the size of the wave by clearly adhering to protocols. And if you listen to what our DG said, he said our current health system can withstand. But if the cases should go up, then we go overhaul. And I think that's why I think that we want to appeal to all Ghanaians, including the media. Now let's set the agenda that to be sustainable in this system of a pandemic, the key intervention, which is cost effective, is adherence to protocols. And then the best one is the wearing of the mask. I think it appears cheap. Some try to realize it, but to me, it's the most cost-effective intervention when you're handling a pandemic like COVID-19.
Very well. Thank you very much, Dr. Asiedu Bekwei. Dr. Asiedu Bekwei is the Director of Public Health with the Ghana Health Service. We do appreciate your time, and we will let you go now so you can carry on with your business. We appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Right. Now, let me turn to Dr. Kwame Sapon Asiedu. Doc, are you there? Hello, Doc.
Yes, I'm here.
Good.
Yeah, I'm here.
Good. So you heard, the submissions from Dr. Bekwei on the vaccines and all of that. But I want you to, give me your take on this, whether you think a lockdown should be recommended, looking at the situation now.
No. I totally agree with what he said. You see, a lockdown in public health is normally called it's a blunt instrument. You use it to slow down the spread of the pandemic so that you can get strategies in place to control it long term. So Normally, you do it at a stage where what we call the prevalence rate is low and the number of cases are not too much. Yes, at the moment, we do not have as much number of cases as we had same time last year. But the truth of the matter is, the number of cases and the number of people, if you listen to colleagues who speak from places like KCCR and other things, it points to the fact that the positivity rate is also quite high. And when you have a high positivity rate, it tells you that the prevalence in the community is also high, because it's a proportion of the community who would develop symptoms, who would then be identified as possible cases, and as a result, will get tested, and some of them will test positive. So if you get a high positivity rate, then it means community prevalence is also high.
Right.
With community prevalence high, and from a country where protections of the general population.
Dr. Sedu, please hold on for us. Let's deal with a connection issue. We'll come back to you. I think we're having a bit of a challenge on. We'll come back to you shortly, Doc. Just hold on for us, and let me turn to you, Doc Bayo. Your thoughts on this whole discussion about a possible lockdown and all of that.
No, I think I agree largely with the earlier two speakers. If you follow public health and if you follow epidemiology, lockdown is not indicated as of now. Sure. Reason is that, like Dr. Asiedu was trying to say, lockdown is basically to slow down the spread of the pandemic and allow us time to think. I think we've done a lot of the thinking already. We know exactly what to do.
Let's implement.
Lockdown is a more expensive exercise now because almost every one of our 16 regions have cases now. So if you say we are locking down the entire country and locking down to do what? We know the what to do, and we know less expensive ways of controlling the spread while waiting for the the vaccines. And that is the use of our masks and then adherence to the protocol. So I would say that anybody advocating for lockdown may not probably be understanding the issues very well. We can avert that lockdown if we adhere to the protocols. And it's a cheaper way of slowing down the spread and not doing a full lockdown.
Right,
no.
So let's just comply with the restrictions imposed and all of that. Sorry, Doc, we are back to you. Please, carry on with your submissions.
Yes, so like Titus said, you don't want to use a blunt instrument at this point, because public health is always a trade-off between the health security of the population and the economic implications of the actions taken. In a country like Ghana, where we do not have a social safety net, so to speak, that the country is lush with money, where if it locks down, for example, it can pay workers, and there's a high level of informal sectors, we've gone past that stage. But having said that, there are a number of things that Dr. Bayo raised and Dr. Stedebeku raised where I need to address for us to understand where, in my view, I think we are missing the point. And this is it. Dr. Bayo started from the point of view, why are we having this uptick? It's because people who felt they were vaccinated, we saw them holding mass gatherings. We saw them holding parties on masks and other things. Once I saw it, I started telling myself that it looks like, as a people, we do not understand the epidemiology of vaccination. And so I think I need to take my time and explain something to everybody. The vaccine does two things. The first thing is it gives you individual protection. The individual protection means that it protects you from either getting infected. When you get infected, it allows your body to mount an immune response and protects you from getting symptoms. If your immune response is not enough, it still protects you from hospitalization. And then it protects you from critical illness, and it protects you from death. Currently, the vaccines we have, we know, are 95 to 99% protection from death. They are about 89 to 93% protection from hospitalization. They are 60 to 70% protection from symptomatic disease, and 60 to 70% protection from getting infection. But we must bear in mind that these levels were measured in countries like the UK and Israel, where vaccine coverage is high. In fact, Israel has passed the herd immunity threshold. The UK is almost there. Which then means that the community protection, because without the community protection, which is what we call the herd immunity, individual protection is very low. because you have a high susceptible population who can be infected, who can end up infecting the people who've been vaccinated, which can then lead to different strains emerging, of which some might even evade the vaccine because you get vaccine resistance. And those of us who work in the health sector, whether you're a doctor or pharmacist, knows how resistance breeds. It is because the pathogen becomes very conversant with the drug that it's dealing with and they are just like us, they've got a brain. They start thinking of how to evade it. So if you are vaccinated, it doesn't mean you cannot die. It doesn't mean you cannot get hospitalized. It doesn't mean you can not get symptomatic disease. But what is even worrying for me in this way is the fact that it protects you 60 to 70% from getting symptomatic disease, which then means you can be infected and not know, not be wearing your protection, going into crowds, and with 98% of the people unvaccinated, infecting people willy-nilly.
Right.
That is why I agree with Dr. Bayo about the fact that it is our political leadership who failed to understand what the vaccines were doing for them, who have brought us here. Because if you understand the epidemiology of vaccine technology, they wouldn't have done what they did. And that is why when I hear people say, oh, people went to a funeral and they were all vaccinated and therefore they couldn't spread it, I'm like, what data are they speaking to? I've got the latest data that's been released from Public Health England, and I'll forward it to Bayo after we finish. And if you see it, you'd realize that hospitalization in the UK, yes, only 10 to 16% of people who have been vaccinated ever get hospitalized, and they leave very quickly because they don't get into critical care.
Right.
But it tells you people are still getting infected. So we need to bear this in mind in planning our strategy and realizing that for us without vaccines, our only saving grace is the protocols, face masks, social distancing, washing of hands. I'll leave it here for now.
Very well, thanks. We'll be coming back to you. Dr. Bayo, so moving forward, what should be done? What do you think? So yes, there's that misunderstanding perhaps, or people just going to sleep thinking that yes, they have been vaccinated and so they're out of the woods, forgetting that a greater majority of the people have not been vaccinated. So what are the authorities to do in terms of messaging? Like you said, the politicians, well, perhaps we can't count on them now as, leading by example, because obviously the example will lead us a certain way. So
it's a difficult situation we find ourselves in as a country. If you ask me, I think that the enforcement bit must come in. We have tried educating people. The education must go on a lot for people to understand it. But looking at the fact that this kind of information we are giving to them has been given to them before, and then we confuse them, we misled them. Getting even the moral authority to go back and tell them becomes a challenge.
Right.
I think that at some point, if the people are set on a path for self-destruction, leadership have the responsibility to protect the citizenry. So I think some enforcement must come in. In our country, it is still, unless I am wrong, and the legal luminaries can inform us, unless it is wrong that now you can move around without masks, it is still a crime. And therefore, we should enforce the law. Knowing the usual Ghanaian, if you hear that 3 people have been arrested somewhere for not wearing masks, if you hear that people have been prevented from boarding the trotro for not wearing their masks, the following day, everybody will comply. And I think that is where we should be going to, because it's an emergency situation. The education, the using of ambassadors, and all of that will be helpful. But looking at it, if this was a new information, perhaps easier. But considering that we gave them the same information, we came back to confuse them, we decided to throw everything to the gutters. If we just keep on encouraging, I think by the time people get to understand and really follow this, we'll be worse off.
Right.
So I think there should be enforcement. And that enforcement should be across the country so that everybody uses their masks. And then we can protect ourselves. Because as for the vaccines, yes, they would come. But the truth is, I don't know when. No one knows when. And if they are coming in piecemeal, then the health protection we are getting would be dodgy.
Right.
It is possible that by the time we get another set of people fully vaccinated, maybe even the first people who got their vaccines may have lost the protection. We do not know.
Yeah.
And I think I agree with the Ghana Health Service with the decision they took initially to spread out the dose so that everybody got at least one dose. Truth is, I mean, if we've checked across the country among health workers who have had just like a single dose, some are getting infected, but they are not dying. Some are getting infected, but they are not getting to critical situation, which means that was a very prudent decision, and we commend them for it. But I think we should take that next step of forcing everybody.
Sure.
We must do that.
Very
and
well.
then the education should also go along.
We'll be taking a break, but quick question.
Yeah.
The fellow Ghanaian messaging or speeches that used to happen, we don't see that much. Do you think it should be brought back, or you think it's been confused in the situation of non-compliance, and so that would also not serve any purpose?
Oh, I think it will serve a purpose. The president is the father of the land. When he speaks, we all listen. He has that authority, and he commands that authority. And I think that when he speaks, we would listen. He should back his words with action, and that makes it better. And I keep saying that if I should hear the president saying, look, we've been invited to this program, we are not going because we are in a wave, or I'm instructing my ministers not to attend any public function that gathers a lot of people because we are in a wave, let's do more virtual things. That is backing his words with action.
Right.
But I think if he speaks, it's helpful. And I think Dr. Asiedu Bekwin hinted at that he might be speaking to the nation soon. I think it will be helpful at this point. And I think it should not come with appeals. From my point of view, it is an existential challenge that is facing us as a country. And I'm crying from the point of view of our healthcare system. The managers of our healthcare system will seek to assure us that we have an improved capacity. That is true. Our capacity is better than when we began. But no healthcare system globally has been able to stand the wrath of this disease when it goes out of control. And so we should always come with that in mind. And from that point of view, I think there should be enforcement. At some point, the police informed us that some of the EIs had expired, and therefore they were powerless to enforce them. If that is the case, then if the president speaks, we should get new EIs if that is what the law requires, to enable them enforce the law so that we can all be safe.
Lastly, the KMA communication slip. What do you make of that? Because, I mean, we cannot be in a situation like this and have all sorts of, these contradictory messages and all these slips. What do you make of that?
It's very unfortunate. I think that's the first thing I would say. Very, very, very unfortunate. And I think that we all have to be in line in terms of what we communicate. If it's indeed a slip, it throws everything and now brings integrity into question, credibility into question. So when statements come, we now have to verify where it's coming from, and could it be another slip? Could it be the reality? I think the communication system should be tightened up. Such slips are not welcome at such a time like this.
Not at all.
We need clear-cut communication, and that communication should be very balanced. I have serious problem with our risk communication as far as this pandemic is concerned. I think sometimes we are too assuring, when in fact a lot of things are out of our hands or out of our control. We should let the citizenry know that the protection of the nation depends on each individual obeying these protocols, and not give too much of an assurance. We have a very robust system, we have that. No country has survived with that. If we had the vaccines, excellent, but in the absence of the vaccines, I think we should communicate well.
Very well. Indeed, that's a very good point. And I would want to come back to Dr. Sapho Kwame here. And on the communication slip, I mean, managing a pandemic is a serious situation. You can't have in there communication slips that raise issues about integrity of institutions, integrity of, the messages that come through, and try to, assure the populace that things are under control and all of that. So what do you make of that, briefly?
To be honest, this is something I don't make a lot of, and I'll tell you why. When was the Delta variant first detected? It was first detected in March 2021. So for starters, when I saw December, I knew no chance. And why do I say so? If you look at the global sequencing database, 49 to 51% of all the sequences come from the UK. And that is why a lot of the variants are identified by the UK, because they invest a lot in sequencing, because they have a very robust vaccine research and development center. So you've got Oxford, you've got Southampton, you've got Cambridge, you've got so many of them, Imperial College, etc., etc. So when the samples that came from India, they were sequencing from that December, they were sequencing in January. The first detection was in March, and even now, there are issues going on in the UK as to why India wasn't red listed when the first detections happened. But it was because the number of some sequences per 100 people were so low that they didn't even realize. At that time, no one could predict the reproductive number. They didn't realize it was this contagious and would take over.
Right.
So with that public health information that I have and sequencing information I have, I don't see how clearly who didn't have access to the samples from India where it was first detected could have detected it in December. And so
but that's clear. That's you. You sit
yes.
in a certain,
yeah, and that's
certain
that's what I'm going to.
Yeah.
So it is clear that it is a slip. But what does that do? Slips like that do not augur well for the integrity of the communication that the citizens issue.
Right.
So how do we quell this mischief? The only way is for such communication to be robustly screened by people who understand what is going on in the sector before they are made public documents. And that is the only thing I would say that is the learning rather than the authenticity of the information, because the information in that, based on the information on sequencing, cannot be said to be authentic.
Sure, very well. Thank you for that. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we begin to look at the parliamentary probe into the contract for the procurement of Sputnik V vaccines. The Minister of Health has appeared before that Parliament committee on 2 occasions. We'll be looking at the developments from that probe. See you shortly. This is the Key Points. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is the Key Points, and we are live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7, online at 3news.com, and on Facebook at TV3 Ghana. So we're currently having a conversation about a possible third wave. In fact, it has been, to some extent confirmed that we are experiencing a third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic in the country currently. And in the studio with me, we have Dr. Titus Bayo, the Deputy General Secretary of the Ghana Medical Association. And on Zoom, we have Dr. Kwame Asiedu-Sapong. He's a pharmacist and a fellow with the CDD Ghana. So we're moving on next to another angle of this discussion, where we're looking at what's been happening recently regarding the probe by Parliament into the procurement of some quantities of the Sputnik V vaccine. The Minister for Health has met the committee on a couple of occasions, and a number of interesting developments have emerged from that committee. So I'll quickly go to Dr. Asiedu-Sapong, sorry, and let me have your thoughts on the parliamentary probe currently, the committee set up to look into the contract for the procurement of the Sputnik V vaccines. What do you make of that whole, agreement to, procure the Sputnik V vaccine? Indeed, let me add that I believe the contract, they say, has been abrogated. So, but at least when it was in force, your thoughts?
Yes, thanks. There were a number of revelations, weren't there? I mean, if you look at the narrative that we were given, even if you look at the narrative that was put out by the Ministry of Health when this whole brouhaha started, and the contrition that came from the minister when he was under oath on a number of things, for example, that they actually were in contact with the sheikh before they started making any advances to obtain vaccines out of facilities like the African Vaccine Platform and COVAX, was interesting. If you look at the fact that it came out that there was no budgeting actually done for the procurement of these vaccines, because at that as November, we didn't have an idea how much these vaccines were going to cost, so we hadn't planned for it. And you were talking about that's November 2020, when vaccine development was already at its end. Bear in mind that both Pfizer and AstraZeneca got licensed in the first week of December of 2020. So by then, as far back as September, October, the immunogenicity data and all that about the vaccines were out. And for some of us who were following the information of vaccine development, the information on safety and efficacy was also out. And we knew that because of how the vaccines had been developed, licensure was going to be pretty quick because the data had been shared with the regulators in the countries where the vaccines were being developed. So when you hear something like that as at November of that year, we still didn't have our budgeting done. Then you go back and look at the narrative that was put out by the Ministry of Health. And I ask myself one simple question. Did the minister read the narrative that was signed and put up on behalf of his ministry? That's the first thing. The second thing for me is the fact that a minister was allowed to come under so much pressure because we couldn't procure vaccines when the second wave hit, to the point that he said he was looking for the vaccines that quickly to be able to protect the Ghanaians from dying. I have a positive and negative view of that, and I'll explain why. My positive view is this. It is good that you have a minister who, in an emergency, felt that he had to do whatever it took to protect the health security of Ghanaians. My negative for that is the fact that anyone who understands how vaccines work, and that is why I've even said that in this current wave, our answer is not vaccination. And Dr. Bayo said it in the studio earlier about, the uptick and the fact that it's not really the vaccine because our vaccine population is low. But that's not even the point. The gap between the first and second dose of these vaccines are normally 8 to 12 weeks. When you have your first dose, it takes about 22 days for you to have optimum protection. And when you have your second dose, 14 days for you to have the maximum protection that a vaccine can give in the individual. What I mean by individual protection. Which means that even if we had procured the vaccines at that time, in February, March, when you were sick, we were not going to get the protection that the vaccines would bring from a community standpoint for another 3 months, which would have taken April, May, June. So what was the pressure and urgency then when we have the very things that in this current wave are going to protect us, which is the protocols, face masks, social distancing, avoidance of crowds, and washing your hands? Would it not have been more prudent if that had been ramped down from a risk communication standpoint, like Dr. Baye was saying earlier, so that we acknowledged that we hadn't planned adequately? Because when it comes to a pandemic, it's always learning. We hadn't planned adequately for the procurement of vaccines, and therefore we were going to be more pedantic and plan rather than go ad hoc and get ourselves into this whole procurement brouhaha that has happened. So when I listen to what the Minister of Health would say, these are my initial thoughts around what came out, that there seems to be a disconnect between what they were feeding the public and what actually transpired. I'll leave it here for now.
Very well. We'll come back. Yeah, we'll be going into a specific soon. But quickly, Dr. Bayo, let me have your thoughts as well on this whole probe into this contract, which we are told has been abrogated. The concerns at the time, according to the minister, is that, well, the exigencies of the time made it, imperative for the government to act in a certain way, and so it was all in the best interest of the citizenry, and so parliamentary approval was not even obtained, and all those things. Your initial thoughts? Cabinet approval not also obtained.
Okay, so I would say that this is a difficult situation. I have no expertise in procurement. And therefore, I won't venture there or try to prefer what is ideal or what should have been done. But suffices to say that I have confidence in our representatives, the representatives of the people, which is Parliament, and I'm happy that they are doing the probe. And from the point of view of a practitioner, all that concerns us is getting efficacious vaccines that have been approved by our FDA, that is backed by science, that we can use. Now, the processes in getting that is a bit cumbersome, that we do not have expertise in. So I'm confident that the parliamentary probe is good. I'm confident that they will act in the best interest of the state, and that at the end of it, Ghana will be better off, and that hopefully, whatever it is, there will be lessons learned from it, that should we ever have another pandemic, we would act better. I think that is what will be my initial comment. As to how the procurement went, the details of it, whether it was right or wrong, I cannot prefer a statement on that.
I appreciate that, and I don't want to, put you on the spot or anything, but there are certain, developments of revelations that emerge that perhaps I think you can comment on it fairly. And let me just ask this, the health minister sits, on the cabinet.
Yes.
He's one of the privileged ministers to be in cabinet.
Okay.
And so it's quite intriguing that this issue was not even, tabled at cabinet, for instance, that let's have a conversation around this. Indeed, yes, there's the need for us to protect the citizenry, no approval from cabinet whatsoever. Isn't that a bit intriguing?
It will be, and it is intriguing. The thing is, before we can make a definitive statement on that, we need to know what the processes in taking things to cabinet are, and what should be sent to cabinet and what should not be sent to cabinet. Who authorizes the final purchases of things like this? Definitely there will be finance involvement. It will not be done on the blind side of the president and senior people in government. So I'm not too sure what the processes should have been. But like I'm saying, I am hopeful that this probe, and I'm told they are done with the sitting, and they are going to come out with their report, whatever it is, would inform us of whether there were mistakes, whether what was done was right, and which is the best way to go. Because it's very difficult to make a direct pronouncement on whether this should have gone that way or that, because...
The minister himself has made some admissions, though. And this is what Dr. Sapwesedu was alluding to, the contrition that he showed there. That, well, I perhaps could have done things better. But let me not push you.
Well, fine.
Let me not push you.
I don't know if that admission means that it's an admission of guilt or an admission that he acted in a particular way.
Yeah.
But from the point of view of us in practice,
sure,
like we've been mentioning all morning, we know the importance of the vaccines, and we need the vaccines. We need vaccines that are licensed, vaccines that are efficacious for the people to use. Now, how those vaccines are procured, I think it's in the remit of those who know the procurement system.
Right.
And that's what the parliamentary group is doing.
Is to do. Very well. Let me turn to Doc now. Dr. Kwame Sapwesedu, we're back to you. So still on this probe, people have, since these revelations came out, and the Minister for Health, coming under some intense fire, there are those who are saying, let's be fair to the minister. He was acting in the best interest of the country, not intending to do any harm or necessarily setting out to break any laws. And so be fair to him. What do you make of that?
Well, I think I acknowledged that in my earlier submission by saying that there's a positive aspect where you can look at that and say that here's somebody who, in a crisis, wanted to act irrespective of the circumstances to protect the public health security of the population. That you can give to him. But the framers of our constitution and the framers of our laws, in their wisdom, ensure that in such emergency situations, certain processes are followed. In the wisdom of those framers, they felt that following those processes would not result in undue delay. The question I ask myself is, have those processes been followed? By the minister's own admission, they were not followed. Should I be concerned about that? Yes, because we live in a lawful and a lawless country. And therefore, much as I would give the minister the credit for having the sense of purpose to do that, I cannot fail to fault him for not realizing, especially with a minister of his caliber and public service duration, not realizing that by not complying with the requirements of an emergency situation, he was probably going to be in breach of certain aspects of our laws. I come to this conclusion because if we are not careful and we begin to say, oh, in an emergency, you can do whatever you like, we'll be opening a can of worms.
Yeah.
In a situation whereby people would be acting ultra-virus of our laws and using "we are not in normal times" as a blanket. If you listen to the minister critical, he said, I was trying to hide behind the executive instruments that have been issued, and then I'll go back to Parliament. That he said he was hiding behind means that he was aware that there was a lacuna and he was trying to exploit it. For me, that should be concerning. But like Dr. Bayer has said, let's see how, the committee counts all the information that he...
So what are your expectations, though? Even though we wait to see what happens, what are your expectations of the outcome?
I expect them to be balanced. The point is that they know we've heard what the minister said. Some of us listened all through. And yes, our parliamentarians, and for that matter, the committee, are the rightful representatives of us as citizens because we voted and we entrusted those, positions and leadership roles to them. But the other thing is they cannot, and I doubt they would, also play on our ignorance and say what we heard is not what we heard. So I expect that they will be balanced. And even if they would bring, because you realize that both the minority and majority have people in that committee who've been ministers before and know the encumbrances that come with holding such ministerial position and the pressures, albeit. And so even if they would try to caveat some of those things to give us an understanding of the peculiar situation in which the minister found himself, I would expect a balance when they do that.
Very well. Let me ask you this last question, though. The calls for the health minister's resignation, what do you make of that, even though we are still waiting for the parliamentary probe, to issue its report, the committee to issue its report? I doubt they would actually make any such recommendation or anything of that sort, but what do you make of the recommendations for his resignation?
You see, I made this post on Facebook and I'll go back to it. I said, those who are asking for the minister to resign, the minister went into a contract for 3.4 million doses of vaccines at $19 each, which is over $60 million US. There's someone who issued letters of credit. There's the Attorney General who probably gave advice. I think if we just say the minister must resign, then he's taking the fall for something that we all in our heart of hearts know that can't be done by one person.
So more heads
for me,
must roll.
For me,
is that what you're
we
saying?
need to wait for, because I'm quite sure that this committee would unearth all those things, how even it came for the LC to be issued, who signed that LC and all those things. And those would be important. At that point, when we've got a full picture, we can ask for the number of heads. I am a bit cautious in asking for the heads now, because if I did that and we found out that other people were complicit in the situation we find ourselves in, then obviously one person would have been the fall guy. And I don't think that is a very fair approach to look at public service. So though I'm concerned about the behaviors of the minister under this current revelations, I would rather wait.
Very well. Thank you so much, Dr. Kwame Sapon-Asiedu. He's a pharmacist and a fellow with CDD Ghana. We do appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll be touching base at some point. But quickly, and stay safe in the UK, because we know there's quite a situation there as well. But back to you, Doc. Your concluding remarks, and we call it a day on this segment.
All right. So my concluding remarks would be that we want Ghanaians to know that COVID is real. COVID is still with us. We are facing a very serious challenge now because we have a variant that is very contagious, infectious, easily spread, and quite lethal. And that we are speaking from the health system, and we are saying our health system, though better, much improved, cannot withstand if we allow this thing to go unchecked. And so people should take personal responsibilities for their lives and the lives of their loved ones. And we can only do that for now with the use of our masks. So everybody should know that you are calling for a vaccine, but you have one vaccine before you, and that vaccine is the mask. So use that whilst you wait for a jab. That would be my appeal. And the final one will be to the leadership of our country, that the appeals will help, the use of ambassadors will help, but we need enforcement because of the mixed communication that has gone on. Without enforcement, it will be difficult for people to voluntarily decide to comply with the law. And let's apply it fairly to everyone so that we can turn the trend downwards.
Very well. And we'll say a big thank you to you as well, Dr. Titus Bayo. He's Deputy General Secretary of the Ghana Medical Association. We do appreciate that, your contributions as well. A few messages have come through. Let me quickly try to read some out here. This one says, good morning to you and your panelists. My second greetings goes to our famous Dr. Titus Bayo, our incoming MP. Somebody says you're an incoming MP. Well, let me leave that out for now. Yes, there's God cannot overturn, the will God cannot overturn by mere creatures. That's Musa Seidu from the Upper West region. Another one coming in says, good morning, Lawyer Abna. As a matter of urgency, the government should fast-track the procurement and importation of the Sputnik V vaccine to tackle this virus once and for all. That's Suleiman Adamba. He says the Big Six Secretary in Tamale. Good morning, Abena, says another. Ghanaians must focus on the contract signed by the company working at the airport COVID-19 tests. That's Osman in Tamale. Walanyo in Akwetia says, I was very impressed by Mr. Kisie Jabin's in-depth knowledge of the law. Okay, so that's preempting the next conversation we'll be having soon. We will be turning to that very shortly. And let me say thanks for the messages that have come through so far. And also to Dr. Titus Bayo and Dr. Kwame Sapon Esiedu. And earlier we had Dr. Esiedu Bekwe, the Director of Public Health with the Ghana Health Service, joining us also via Zoom. We do appreciate his contributions as well. We'll take a break. When we come back, we go into the issue about the vetting of the Special Prosecutor nominee, Mr. Kisie Jabi, and also the appointment of an acting IGP in the person of COP George Ekufo Dampare, and what these developments mean for our fight against corruption and indeed at the security of the country. See you shortly.
Access to information